So today we have Mr. Santosh Patel. How's it going?
Good, man. How are you guys doing?
Doing good, doing good. So president and co-founder of Complete Specialty Solutions, been in the medical industry for countless years now. So we'll dive right into it, all right?
Yeah, let's do it.
So we met at a dentist conference.
Yes.
Right? And
Dallas.
In Dallas. You know a lot about what is, dental branding or management in the dental field. So what are some mistakes that you typically see when it comes to branding and advertising for dentist offices?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of different varieties of marketing and approach. And I think some of the things that I've seen in the medical space, I was in the medical space for about 10 years before I jumped back into the dental world. But, I think a lot of the content that's out there is not really emotionally driven. Right.
Sure,
so if you think about some of the content, in the medical world, I remember, a new doctor's coming on and the first thing they want to do is take a picture of the doctor in the white coat and like a serious face and put it on a big postcard. But that doesn't really connect to patients, right? That's not something that's connecting to them. And so it starts to now alter a little bit of having the doctor with family, with friends in a different environment and or video, doing something that actually connects. But even on the content, it's not just a picture of the doctor, right? It's what can this doctor help you do? So if it's a person who has difficulty walking because of arthritis or whatever it may be, it's focusing on the emotional elements of the service the doctor can provide, not just the fact that they are a doctor, right? And I think that's one of the biggest elements that we found that was missing in marketing was creating that emotional connection to that patient.
Yep.
Why do they actually want to call us, right? They want to call us because there's a certain problem they want addressed.
Sure.
And this doctor can help address that.
Yeah, one of the things that I learned from you is that the patient experience starts way before they ever come into the office. So talk to me about that. When does the patient experience start and what can you do to improve it early on?
Yeah. So, two different industries, right? You got medical and dental. Typically in medical, most patients are finding their doctors primarily through their insurance as well as through word of mouth marketing, right? Sure. But now, everyone has a website, and you have to have a website at this point, right? Every provider has to have a website, and so patients are going to naturally go towards, web content and go to the website, look at Google reviews, and the first thing they're going to look for is who is this individual that I'm going to go see?
Sure.
And most times it's just a picture, right?
Yeah.
It's just a picture of the doctor. And actually, it's usually a picture, an outdated picture,
or,
right?
Or a stock photo.
Yeah,
or something.
Yeah. Hopefully it's not. Hopefully it's actually the doctor.
Yeah.
Unless you want to make me look like Brad Pitt, then that works. But I think usually it's an older picture, and maybe it's a picture of them 5-7 years ago, and it's not as up to date, right? And so it doesn't seem as genuine because it's not fresh. But if there's video there, then those patients they're going to click on that video because they actually want to understand who am I going to connect with and who is this individual. So the patient experience actually fully starts right there on the website, right? So from the moment they hit play and they actually can hear the doctor's voice, they can do a video tour of the practice. They can see what the parking lot, what the lobby, all of that looks like. That actually surprisingly decreases the anxiety of patients because they already know going into it what to expect, right? So that's a huge plus when it comes to video marketing is because you're just walking the patient through this journey before they have been there. Right, so they already have this expectation of, I know what the parking lot's going to look like. I know what the lobby's going to look like. I know what the doctor looks like. I know what the doctor sounds like.
Sure.
All those small things I think we've taken for granted. But look at all successful practices and websites, and they have great content. And it's short, it's clean, simple. But it's wonderful video content. It's supplemented with other content, right?
Sure.
But video content just really allows the patient's experience to start right there.
So you talk a lot about video content. These are healthcare providers. They're not necessarily on-camera spokespeople.
Sure.
What would you say to those who may be more timid or uncomfortable about being in front of the camera? I know you have been in front of the camera for your own business a couple of times.
I have.
Just talk about, overcoming that fear or the importance to do it, regardless of, hey, I might be a little timid or uncomfortable doing it.
Sure. So I used to be a high school math teacher. I taught for hundreds of kids.
Yeah.
We go teach at, I'd teach at different universities and go speak in front. But you put the camera on in front of me, you turn on and see the red light, and it's deer in the headlights. Exactly right. I become extremely timid, right? But it's practice. And, I think the main thing for doctors, any professional really, is when you're getting behind the camera is to start to recognize, okay, if I took the cameras away and I had a patient in front of me, how am I connecting to that patient, right? And some of that is literally just practice. Yeah. And you have to, we kind of always go with the phrase of get comfortable being uncomfortable.
There you go.
Right? So you got to keep doing it until it becomes a habit, and that's okay. I think a lot of times people shy away from doing it because they don't want to go through that first initial uncomfortable feeling, but you got to power through it. You got to kind of go through it, and that's the only way you're going to be able to really connect to your client base.
Got you. So a lot of dentist office or medical providers in general, their websites so wordy and clunky, kind of outdated. How can they avoid some of these pitfalls? I know we talked about video marketing, but what other things can they do to have a more fresh vibe and something that's going to attract patients?
Yeah, the first thing you want to do is ask yourself when you go to a website, do you read everything that's on the website?
There you go.
Right? And if the answer is yes, then you know what? Your website's going to probably have a lot of written context. If the answer is no, because I think society as a whole probably spends maybe 5 seconds on a page, right?
Wow.
They need something that's going to be visually appealing to them, right? It's the same thing as a resume. You think about a resume, when a resume has a ton of text, the eye still goes straight to kind of the top middle of the resume, right? And if that part's not attention grabbing, you kind of lose interest, right? So think of the website the exact same way. When you go to the website, it has to have a clear picture, clear image. It also has to be clear in terms of what service and what product you provide, right? And I think from a perspective of fresh, less is more.
There you go.
Right?
Yeah.
If you can go focus on kind of, again, everyone wants to tell their story, everyone wants to write it down, but not everyone necessarily wants to read it, right?
Yeah.
So maybe look critically at your website and think about what message you're sending and how do you make it concise.
Got it. So switching gears a little bit, we talked about the providers, but now let's talk about the vendors that are providing these services to these providers. You are one of those vendors.
I'm a vendor.
Yeah, you go.
Guess. Yeah.
You go into these practices and you're getting business from these practices. What are some of your strategies on how to procure medical offices or dental offices as a client?
Yeah. So, honestly, I just found that you have to go in and you have to be genuine about your approach, right? Yeah. And I think the way our business works, we provide specialty services for dentists. Not everyone's going to be a great client for us, and we're not going to be a great client for everybody, right? And so actually going in with the mindset of learning about a practice and learning about their needs, and understanding a little bit more about their needs, and if it is a good fit, then going into, okay, this is what we offer, this is what we can do for you, right? I think a lot of times it's a hard sell, hard push, and that's an immediate push, or wall comes up to say, look, I'm not interested in this, right? So that's, I think one of the biggest things is actually sitting back and just listening and learning, right? Like, for example, when I go to an office for the first time, the doctor wants to sit down and kind of start going through kind of the nitty gritty and just get straight to it. Yeah. I actually want to take a tour of the practice, right? And I want to understand a little bit more of what is the doctor's vision of what they want to do. Yeah. And then that's when you actually start to learn about what they're passionate and excited about, right? Yeah. Because they walk through the different practice, say, oh, this is here because of this. And I bought this because this is what I want to do next, right? Mm-hmm. So I start to understand those different dots and start connecting them and say, okay, this is why I think we could be a good fit for you, right? And I think your vision is to do X, Y, Z. Mm-hmm. We can help you accomplish that. This is how we can do that. Versus going into a very generic pitch of this is what we do. Because they may not be interested in certain aspects of what I'm pitching. Yeah. And I may need to modify our business model for them specifically to make sure we're able to cater to their needs.
Got it. Yeah. So it sounds like a very tailored approach. You go in there and you find out what that client may need or how you can better serve them as opposed to, giving them a product offering. If you will.
And I'm probably not the best when it comes to hard sell, right? Because again, I never found that to be successful. Yeah. I don't want someone to feel rushed into making a decision. I want to make sure that they understand the decision they're about to make. Yeah. And it works for both sides, right? Because you don't want someone to have resentment into your service, right? You want to make sure everyone's on the same page, everyone understands it. And sometimes, my sales cycle may take 4 or 5 months, right? Yeah. It's, as much as we would like to get the sale and close it and be done with it, I think the main goal is we want retention of our sale, right? Gotcha. And then we want our existing clients to go out and tell other people and say, for 5 months, we held off, and gosh, I should have called them earlier, right? And at the same time, it's what am I giving these individuals? As part of our CRM, we'll put little notes in terms of, okay, what is this practice like? What does this practice do? And how can we share content with them? With information, even if they're not going to be a client of ours. I mean, we get so many referrals from folks that we actually do not serve. Right? Because maybe their practice is not ready for our service yet, or, maybe it's not a good fit at the moment, but they're in that network, and they're in the network of the healthcare professionals. And when someone asks a certain question, like, have you heard of this group? And they say, no, well, could you make an introduction? And so it's funny, but we actually get a lot of referrals from folks who are not clients yet.
Got you. So talk to me about that, because it seems like it's delayed gratification by working that pipeline. So how do you continue to give these services or to help, even though you're not seeing any, financial compensation right away? It's really a delayed process. Like, how do you keep going even though, you're working towards a longer end goal?
I mean, anyone who's ever planted anything, right? You plant a seed, it doesn't happen overnight, right? You have to kind of nurture it. You have to watch it grow, and you have to understand if you have to turn it, pivot, whatever you need to do. There's certain things you have to do immediately. If you're in the game for immediate gratification, healthcare sales may not be the best, right? Doctors are, if you think about just your client base, if your doctors, your clients, they're scientists.
Sure.
They're not very reactionary. They want to understand before they make a decision. And at the same time, a lot of them have been burned. Right. And they've been burned in the past, or they've heard stories. They haven't been burned, but they know someone else who's been burned, and they read one Facebook post about it, and that's going to stick in the back of their mind. That's not going to happen to me, right? And so that's okay. Walk them through that. Walk them, let them understand, like, this is what the service is. And any hesitations or questions you have, let's have some open dialogue about it.
Gotcha. Yeah. So let's go to two different polar sides of the sales cycle, right? So those who may not have any experience in healthcare sales or procuring, healthcare clients, where do they start? That'll be part A of the question.
Okay.
And then for those who, like myself, have gotten some dental clients, some healthcare clients, how do you continue to keep those clients? Talk about retention.
Sure. All right. So the first one is, how do you break into it? Right. I always say think backwards. Right. Okay. So
reverse engineer. That's my favorite term. I probably learned it from you.
You got to reverse engineer it. Absolutely. So, walk it backwards. So if you're thinking about your client base, so we'll go with dentists, right? So our client base are dentists. So we're thinking about, okay, where do they get content, right? So they get content through publications. They get content through social media, Facebook groups, study groups, CE events. That's where they get content, right? For them, this is a trusted environment for content, right? So how do I then become part of that group, right? So CE events, you can attend CEs. I mean, you and I, we met at a trade show, right? Dental trade show, right? So visibility at those trade shows, visibility at different CE events is extremely important. Joining different Facebook groups. Now, some Facebook groups are focused around only providers and clinicians, and you won't be able to break into that. But the other Facebook groups are focused around kind of a combination of vendors and providers, right? So you need to be on those groups, and you need to be present, right? It's not, don't just read it and walk away from it. And please don't just jump straight into, this is what I can do for you, and go with the sales cycle, because everyone has seen it, and it doesn't end well on those groups. Just give information. And I think what naturally happens, and I see it all the time, is someone asks a question, I give a genuine answer. Again, they could be in a complete different state. I may not be able to be of any value to them in the market that they're in. But they look at my page, right? And from there they go to my webpage, and they like it, and or they talk to someone else about it, or they tag someone, which this has happened multiple times. They tag a friend of theirs that they went to dental school that lives in the market that we are in, right? And says, hey, have you heard of these guys? And we'll tag my name with it, right? So then that starts the ball rolling. But I think from the standpoint of where do you start, you got to start with understanding where do people get content, right? So if they're getting content, CEs, trade shows, go there. The other piece is sometimes just grinding it out, right? So I think when we first started, First thing I did was dentist in 75035,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like start making your database. Yeah, there's a lot of people who have lists, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can go out and buy lists. But are they qualified lists?
Sure.
You never know if they're qualified lists. So, we said, okay, well, we know the markets we're going to serve.
Yep.
Let's just start there, right? So starting by going down that list, and then networking, right? So I am fortunate and blessed to be part of so many different networks that, it's culminated over a period of time. But once someone is in another practice and they say, well, it seems like you want specialty services. Have you thought about complete specialty solutions?
Yep.
I can make an intro for you, right? They don't have to be an expert in our business, but they just have to trust me as a person that I'm going to do right for their client. Right?
Gotcha. So many follow-up questions.
Yeah, that was only part one.
That was only part one. Before we go on to part two about retention, you talked about getting that list.
Yeah.
What was your approach to once you got that list? Was it cold calls? Was it emails? Was it sending out actual snail mail? I've seen people do that. What was your approach when you got the list?
You got to try it all, man. So we did the cold call. We failed miserably, but it wasn't the cold call. It was our pitch.
Okay.
Right? We couldn't get past the person who was answering the phone.
Yeah.
So we weren't engaging enough. Where we found out was we were actually disrespectful to the person who was answering the phone because we just wanted to go straight to the doctor. But they're the gatekeeper. If you can't address their needs and be respectful to them, you're never going anywhere near the doctor, right? So we had
gatekeeper.
They're the gatekeeper, right? And so we realized that our approach was completely wrong. It's not that cold call is not effective. Our approach is wrong, so we have to modify our approach. We also tried mailers, right? So we tried postcards. We actually did an A and B test, and I highly recommend doing that. So an A and B test of a mailer and then a letter, right? So we mailed the same thing, 2 different zip codes in a small segment, right? Because I know cost, you got to be mindful of cost and budget, right? So you can spend $100 on postcards, spend $100 on mailers, send them out. See who responds better, right? We found because we're in the professional healthcare space, it made more sense for us to send letters out. Postcards sometimes get kind of lost and then tossed away, and it may not also hit the target market that we want. A lot of the offices that we work with, we realize they actually do not do postcards for their own marketing to patients, right? So we started thinking, well, why don't you do that? Well, we toss them away. You toss them, so you think your patients toss them, so that's why you don't believe in it, right? So that makes sense. That's your client base. That works for you. Well, that also ends up working for us, right?
There you go.
So we do letters. So letters are a little bit more custom, a little more formal, a little bit more professional, right? And it's addressed, and so it doesn't just say kind of current resident, right? We actually, again, we go through, we make the database, we know the practice name, we on the website, the doctor's name,
there you go.
Address it to the doctor. Yeah.
Got you. So you talked about finding where your potential clients go to get content.
Yeah.
Right. And so you talked about CE events and things like that, networking events, and you're the networking king.
I
I just want to give you a little crown there. But I think you took it a step further, and correct me if I'm wrong. You went from just finding these events to sponsoring and hosting these events, right? So talk to me about that.
Yeah. So, a lot of our clients, again, clients that are our clients and folks that we've met with that are not our clients yet, right? We just try to understand what is their pain point in dentistry, right? And so a lot of them will say, we have a hard time with case acceptance, or, we have a hard time with hiring the right team members. We've been fortunate to have a strong enough network of folks who are experts in those spaces to say, well, why don't we just pull something together, right? I mean, let's allow our teams to come in and just showcase our knowledge. And it's not a hard sell at all. It's, no one's sitting there and saying, hey, you have to purchase our service to talk to us. It's us just giving. And it's about 15 minutes per person, so we end up being there for an hour. The event costs money, right? But it's only the cost of the dinner. So we're not trying to make any money out of it. It doesn't put the client out or potential client out much, $35, right?
Yeah.
It's for dinner. So it's been a really big win-win because, number one, no one feels threatened that they have to show up and there's a big fee or they have to buy something, right? I think they're going to buy the service once they feel the benefit after the CE event or the event itself. And we call that event the get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Really?
Right?
Really?
Yeah. Because we've had a lot of people come back to us and say, gosh, if I did this practicing of case acceptance and patient presentations, if I did this when I first started my practice, I feel like I would be in a complete different area. I mean, we had doctors who were red in the face when they were trying this role play. Came back and said, I've never had an opportunity to practice like this before. And they've been practicing for 5 years.
Wow.
Right? And so that small moment of reflection has allowed them to realize, okay, I need to keep practicing and I can get better.
Yep.
And again, the fact that they did that, they trusted us, right? So it went back into a trust element. And again, one day maybe there would be a client, maybe not, but I think they know other people.
Yeah.
They're in that kind of safe zone of providers. So we're pretty confident, it will eventually bear some fruit.
Yeah. So what it sounds like, where it comes to, planting those seeds, it's all about making those potential clients comfortable and providing them content and providing them value. That's all I keep hearing. Hey,
That's
I want to provide
Yeah.
others value. And then, like you said, eventually it'll bear fruit.
Yeah, you got to listen to it. I mean, the clients will tell you what their biggest pain points are, right? And so, but if you go in trying to just pitch your service, but that's not an immediate pain point today, then they're not listening, right? Because you're not addressing their issue.
I remember we literally got a gig, and she said, I gave you the gig because your question to me when you first showed up is, what is your pain point?
Yeah.
A lot of times as creatives, we're always, look at our portfolio and look what we can do for you. But it's never, what do you need help with, and how can we help you better with your potential clients?
Yes.
And so I think that pain point, that's a key term, but it's real to get those clients.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it works in so many different areas. Absolutely.
Well, one thing I heard you talk about was making notes in your CRM system.
Yeah.
So I thought that was very intriguing. So if you want to elaborate on that and then talk about retention.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to run through how many client offices, and sales attempts in a month, right? And so how do you remember everyone, and how do you remember like where you last left off, right? So, for your clients as well as prospective clients, folks that are in your pipeline as well, we keep a system where we kind of document, where number one, our email is kind of stored within this mechanism, so then we can always refresh back to what information was shared.
Yep.
We also save like short notes on, okay, this person likes this person, maybe had this before 3 years ago and it didn't work out for these reasons. So we can go back into it and remind ourselves before we talk to them, okay, just, we know that this is a sensitive topic for you because of what happened 3 years ago.
Sure.
Right. And so I think that's important. So on the retention side, I think a lot of times people feel once they've paid for the service, that they've signed the contract, then they've lost touch from the actual provider, the service provider now, the vendor at that point. And sometimes that's the case, right? There's a handoff, there's a sales team, and there's an activation team, right? But I think in order for that sales team to continue to have, I would say, compounding referrals, right? Where one referral is generating a referral of two other folks, right? Then you have to stay engaged and make sure that the service that you guys are ultimately providing has met and exceeded their expectations. If it has, then that's when you can go back in and say, hey, thank you so much for telling me that. Would you feel comfortable bringing this up in one of your Facebook forums? Or would you feel comfortable introducing us to a couple of your friends that you feel could benefit from this?
Or saying a testimonial for us.
Or doing a testimonial for you. Yeah, absolutely.
There you go. And so what I'm hearing is the importance of the lifetime value of a client, not just the initial transaction. You're talking about cultivating a relationship with each of your clients.
Yeah. I mean, you got to be in the industry that you enjoy, right? Like I love talking to dentists. I love talking to healthcare professionals. I've just always have. Again, I may not always do business with everyone. That's okay. I've come to terms with that. That's all right. There's only one of me, right? And so, but I think ultimately, as you think about what is that your vision is to grow a like-minded client base. And if you focus on that base and you cultivate that relationship, you're going to get more folks who are very like-minded.
Dive deeper into that, because a like-minded client base. I know when you're first, especially we're going to talk about startups next. So when you're in that startup phase, you're taking on any clientele that you can get.
You take them.
You
should, honestly, because you really don't know what you want yet.
There you go. You go. But then you talk about having a like-minded client base. I'm sure that makes your experience as a service provider way more enjoyable, and then you probably can create systems and infrastructure because they are like-minded. So talk to me about creating that like-minded client base.
I mean, so you first have to start by taking everyone, right? and the reason for that is because you yourself don't really know what client base bodes well with your personality mix, right? But then you quickly find out. And I think the goal there is to understand, what kind of client understands and respects your service and also trusts you and your pedigree and your background and what you are able to offer, right? And so I think that's where we started to go at is, okay, well, we know there's a lot of folks who want our service, but maybe we're not a good fit for their practice. And how much energy are we going to spend in trying to be a good fit for their practice? Yep. And that energy, if that's 50 phone calls to try to get that client to sign, when we know that even once they do sign, we're going to spend even more time to make sure we're exceeding their expectations, versus being able to go spend that same energy finding another client that already understands a little bit about what your services are, has a connection to one of your existing clients, right? Who comes in with the mindset of saying, how do we partner through this, right? If I'm seen only as a vendor, probably not a good partnership. Yeah. If I'm seen as a partner, we're going to both do well, right?
So switching gears, we're going to talk about startups. So if you want to just give me a little bit about your background and your overall experience with startups.
Yeah. So my background really, outside of being a high school math teacher, moved to Houston to get my master's in healthcare administration and an MBA. I started working for one of the largest for-profit hospital company in the nation in the physician employment space, right? And so that actually was kind of like a pendulum swing in the industry, which was kind of a startup in that sense. Even though it was part of a big organization, we're out there acquiring practices. So we had a very startup mentality where we're at the grind, we're hustling, we're out there trying to find every doctor, every practice, every individual that we could to see if they would be a good fit for our practice model. Yep. My wife's a dentist, my brother-in-law's a dentist. I've helped them kind of build their respective practices as well. And it, kind of gives you a different perspective of how it is in a corporate mindset, where you have an expense account and you have an infrastructure.
What are those?
Yeah, I know, right? It gives you, you have a lot more of a margin of error opportunity in that type of environment than you do being an entrepreneur, right? An entrepreneur in the corporate environment, we had big fancy dinners and, open bar and all that stuff for our clients. And then you go into, when you're an entrepreneur, you're like, hey, you want Starbucks? Right. Can we meet at Starbucks? Right. I mean, that's where you start. Right. And eventually you move your way up. But I think that was kind of the mindset. Right. But in the startup phase, it was really the journey of how do we understand our different roles and responsibilities in different steps. Right. Everyone has a vision. You want to be successful. Right. But define that and reverse engineer it.
There you go.
Okay. So I want to have, 100 clients. Great. In a year. I want to have 100 clients by the end of the year. Perfect. So how am I going to get to that 100 clients? All right. So I need to have, if I have a close rate of 50%, I need to have 200 client meetings.
Yep.
Okay, great. How am I going to get my 200 client meetings? Okay, well, if sending a cold call is 10% of my hit, then I need to have 2,000 cold calls, right? Yep. So reverse engineer it. And again, I'm a math teacher by trade, so I'm always going to look at the analytics and data.
Yeah.
But
numbers.
yeah, exactly. So, but I think having that, it's easy to say, I just want to have 100 clients, but when you start putting pen to paper and realize how much work you need to put in, then you have a plan, right? Then you actually have a goal and a plan to aim for. And then you got to just hold yourself accountable. Action plans, checklists. I mean, look, no one's going to hold you accountable when you're starting your own business, right? And if you're on a sales team, you're pretty much, it's an eat what you treat kind of model, right? Where it's essentially you're paid off of commission. And if you can't generate revenue and income based on your performance, then you're not eating. Right. So I think there's
what you kill.
Yeah, exactly. I always say in healthcare, eat what you treat.
Oh, yeah. Eat what you treat. Gotcha.
Eat what you treat. Eat what you treat. But it is. I mean, on the sales side, it's different, right? That's just how it is. And so, but yeah, I mean, I think from the startup journey, so I helped kind of start that component, and then I was still employed within the corporate environment and moved to a different role. I was in a cush gig, right? Actually, I loved it. I loved the role I was in. I was covering all of Texas in a COO capacity, had over 500-600 employees through the model. I was fulfilled, right, from that element of professionalism. But I always wanted to test myself on the entrepreneurial side. Okay. And I felt like, if I was going to do it, this was the time for me to do it. And I knew there was going to be a lot of risk associated with that. I didn't honestly realize how much risk until I was about 6 months in. But it was just one of those things that I think I realized that you have to stay focused on and understand that you're going to have some bad days. You will have some bad days, and you'll take 2 steps forward and sometimes 3 steps back. But as long as you keep staying focused on checkpoints and benchmarks, you can weather the storm.
So what makes you take that dive to go from the cushion, as you said, in that corporate world, even though it's a little startup entrepreneurial,
Sure.
but it's still, you got the backbone and the infrastructure behind you. What made you take that jump or make that jump into full-blown entrepreneurship with all of the risk and the uncertainty?
Yeah, it was a big risk. Family, 2 kids. I was kind of primary income, right, for the household, but I wasn't fulfilled, right? Like I felt personally, I was still at the disposal of the organization if there was a change, right? And then I didn't feel like I was able to move at the pace that I wanted to. I'm competitive, just by nature, right? So I'm a competitive person, and that competitiveness grew over time. I was not competitive in high school, right? That kind of grew over time. And it's the environment of people that are around you that make you competitive. And so I realized that, I want to start my own journey. I want to try to prove it to myself, but also want to prove other people right. I think people focus on proving other people wrong. There was a lot of people in my life that believed in me, right? And so I wanted to prove them right, that these are things I can do successfully.
That's self-fulfilling prophecy. We're going to have show number 2 because there's so many that I want to follow up on. The competitive edge, the self-fulfilling prophecy to prove people right. I tell people all the time, you get an A in kindergarten and you feel like you need to make an A in first grade. And you feel like you need to make an A in second grade, and it's perpetual.
It is.
It's cyclical. So we'll say that for discussion number 2.
Yeah, absolutely.
But in terms of leadership
Sure.
in these startups, what are some components of leadership when it comes to starting a business?
Empathy, listening. I think understanding what is it that your client wants. If you're going in with the mindset of saying, this is what my client needs, you're not going to succeed, right? If you understand there's a philosophy called design thinking, and some of the largest corporations use it, and it's end user philosophy. What does your end user really want? And reverse engineer it. How do you get there, right? And I view the same way when it comes to leadership. It comes into what's the end user, and that's my employees, right? Much of our business has pivoted because of feedback from our employees, right? Where we think this is where we want to go, but we're actually not the ones who are driving, right? It's our employees who are driving, right? We're kind of the GPS where we think we know where we want to go, but they're the ones who actually are the eyes and ears in the business that come back to us, and we've created an environment where they can come back to us and say, hey, look, I don't think this is going to work, and here's the reason why. You have the XYZ problems. We need to address that first. And so I think that's where leadership starts, is listening, right? Once you can kind of listen to your team, come up with a vision, come up with a plan, and then sit down and do checkpoints with your team. I always come to my three I's when it comes to leadership is inspire, instruct, and inspect, right? You got to be able to inspire your team, have a vision, have a goal, make sure everyone's on board with it, right? And not everyone has to be. If they don't, then that's okay. They're just not part of your team. They'll be part of someone else's team, right? And then instruct, right? You can't just throw someone into a mix without providing the right guidance and structure that they need, right? And then the last piece is, how do you inspect? How do you make sure you're hitting your checkpoints? How do you make sure you're hitting on your path to your vision? And if you need a course correct, right? How do you course correct? So those are kind of the 3 I's that we really kind of live by, is just inspire, instruct, and inspect. Got you.
So with leadership, it's difficult managing people, whether you're managing 10 people or 110 people, or in your case, you're talking about 500 people.
Yeah.
It's tough managing people because we're people. Do you believe leadership is something that's innate or DNA based, or is it something that can be learned, something that can be taught? What's your thoughts around leadership?
Yeah, I think there's a natural gift that some people have to connecting to people. But I've also seen, and I'm probably a testament to the story, is I was a shy individual in high school, right? Like I just was. There was a couple people in my life who opened me up into bringing me to different groups and individuals, and that carried into college, and then from college carried to grad school. So I would say, like, I don't think it's 100% DNA driven. I think it can be taught. I think it's you have to absorb it through osmosis, right? It's your inner circle, right? The people you hang out with, the people you make sure you follow, right? I mean, there's different folks that you can follow, and you kind of become a chameleon with those individuals. But that's, I definitely think the more an individual invests time, and I think leadership is one of those phrases. It's like, you should be a better leader. Okay, great. How? Right? Like the next follow-up question is how?
Yeah, there you go.
Right? Well, what is it that you're trying to lead? If it's tennis players are going to focus on their own work. A football player, quarterback, Tom Brady, right, has to lead a whole team, right? So a tennis player just has to lead themselves and lead a structure of who's going to support them to be successful. Quarterback of a football team is going to have to actually understand where does each individual have an area of opportunity, and then work with them to get them and motivate them, going back to the inspire, instruct, and inspect, to get them to that next level. So it's not something that happens overnight, but it's something that definitely is invested in time.
Got you. Now, you talked about inspire, instruct, inspect.
Yeah.
Correct? And you talked about, I always like to do the coaching analogy, right?
Yeah.
Like, you can go out there and be Kobe. You can go out there and be LeBron, where you're talking about being the best I. But a coach is about putting your team in the best position to succeed.
Sure.
Right? What is your approach to scaling that?
Yeah.
Right? It's easy to do it with a 12-person basketball team. How do you do that with a 54-man football team, or a team of 500 across the entire state?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I want to say is about the Kobe's and the LeBrons of the world. The best athletes in the world still have a coach.
Absolutely.
There's not a single athlete. Tiger Woods in his prime still had a coach.
Yep.
Right? There's not a single athlete that doesn't have a coach.
And the athletes, when they do switch their trainers or their coaches, a lot of times you can tell.
Yeah. Or they bring them with them when they switch teams.
Yeah.
Right? They just bring them with them.
Yeah.
And the reason why they want that is because they want someone to push them. They don't necessarily, those individuals are so competitive, so driven, they don't want a yes person, right? They don't want someone to say, oh yeah, you're doing a great job. They want someone to say, no, you're doing a terrible job. You need to do this a little bit better, and this is how you're going to do it better, right? So I think that's one element that I think is a reminder that we should never be afraid to ask for help, right? And having a coach is nothing negative. It's something that should be actually inspired to kind of take you to the next level. Yep. But the question is, how do you then scale, and how do you lead multiple groups? Well, you can't lead them all, right? Like, so I think the best way you have to structure is, what is your infrastructure going to look like? What's your scope? Maybe you can manage and lead 7 individuals, and those individuals are going to lead 7 individuals, and those individuals are going to lead 7 individuals, and then you start to scale out to the 500-600 individuals, right? But if you can't get your first team of 7 bought into the same vision, the same philosophy, same motivation, then there's going to be a disconnect between the next level of 7, right? And I think one of the biggest things that you have to do is, how do you complement your own weaknesses with your team? Because you don't have all the answers. Sure. You have to acknowledge that, right? I think Google says it like, a lot of companies, what they do is A's hire B's, B's hire C's, because they're afraid that if the C takes the B's job, the B doesn't want to give up their job to the C, right? So, and then the A doesn't want to hire someone who's as good as the A, because, well, I don't want them to take my job. Yeah. Well, you've just set up your organization for failure, right? Because usually it's the individual in that position, that C, that's your client-facing position, right? Yep. That's your customer support, that's your sales team. That's somebody who is direct, hands-on with your client. And so I think our goal is, how do we just make sure we're hiring A's across the board, or B's across the board, everyone's consistent, and then we just kind of make sure everyone has the right wherewithal and abilities to kind of continue to grow and scale. Yeah.
You're talking about hiring. What is your hiring process? Because like you said, without a good team, you can't go very far. You have to have people that complement your weaknesses. You have to have people that are smarter and better than you in a lot of different categories. What's your approach to hiring and finding the right people for your team?
So for our startup, right, actually, I like to be the first line of defense on the hiring. When I call the individuals, I probably have maybe 1 or 2 technical questions, right, just to make sure they understand somewhat of the role. But I actually ask them more about what motivates them, and tell me a story. One of my favorite questions to ask is, give me 3 individuals who've influenced you the most, and why, right? And so you got to think about that, right? And
Yeah.
a lot of people.
I'm thinking.
Yeah,
As soon as you said that, like automatically, like I know you're not asking me that question, but I think I'm like,
Yeah.
Yeah,
So that
yeah.
says a lot about you as a person.
Yeah.
Right. And it's, there's always a standard. A lot of people say, oh, my mom, my dad, which is fine. If you want to use both, it's great. And then who's a third? Who was that third? Who was it? Your basketball coach? Was it your fourth grade teacher? I had someone who told me, who of the three, that gave me two names of people who told them they couldn't do something.
yeah,
That motivated them. That was influential, right? And so I go through that process because I want to understand the individual. You can teach technical. You can always teach technical, right? And I think if you're hiring for just technical, you're probably not hiring for long term. You're hiring just because you've gotten busy. You got to have someone who can fill this need immediately, and you don't want to train, right? If that's your business, then that's fine. That's not our business. Our business is focused around let's get someone in place, understand that there's about a 90-day, 120-day learning curve. But if we find the right person, the right personality, the right mix that bodes well with our culture, then we can teach the technical.
gotcha. To finish off here, what is one incredible insight that you can give to exponentially grow someone's success? What's your one incredible insight?
Get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say, think about the things that you don't like to do, but you need to do to be successful. And that's, if that's practicing how you're going to present treatments to patients, if that's doing video content, right? If that's writing an article, maybe you don't feel like you're an effective writer, do it, right? And send it out and let people, put red ink all over it. And that's okay. You have to understand, like, that's part of the journey, right? Understand that, like, it's okay to get kind of knocked down a little bit and pick yourself back up. But I would say if anything, it's get comfortable being uncomfortable and accept that that's kind of the norm.
Awesome. I appreciate your time.
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
This was fun. Definitely going to have to do a round two. I got to talk about the competitive edge and proving people right. Some very interesting concepts. But no, I appreciate your time and looking forward to the next one.
Awesome, man. Thank you guys. I appreciate it.